Hey everybody, Plushie here, and after all that slacking, finally today we'll be going through the 3 brand new servants that was released during the Samurai Remnant collab. And according to the poll I made quite a while ago, you guys really wanted to see a hot take video on Miyamoto Iori, the welfare saber of the event first and foremost. So that is exactly what we're gonna do. Can he stand out among the sea of single target saber welfares, or is he just going to be another forgettable addition to the roster? Without further ado, let's get into today's topic of Miyamoto Iori. I'm not going to focus too long on Iori's base stats because all around he is pretty standard. He has a really good extra attack at 6 hits, which generates him quite a bit of stars and MP when he uses it, and he has a standard double buster, double arts deck with a buster MP. Now, looking at some of his MP effects, you might imagine he would have liked 2 quick cards instead of 2 arts cards, but honestly I don't see that as that big of an issue, especially after we've looked at his kits. You will realize how he kind of wants to loop his MP despite being a buster servant. So having 2 arts cards is pretty nice. He has a base MP gain of 0.42% per hit, giving him a 1.68% gain arts card, which is once again really standard for this kind of deck. So overall, nothing too crazy about his base stats, but it's really solid, compensates his kit quite well, I'd say. Iori's first skill is a 3-turn 500% star absorb up, a 3-turn 30% crit up, a 3-turn 10 star per turn generation effect, a 3-turn 50% mental debuff resist up, all on a 6-turn cooldown. So immediately, this is a very solid skill. It has all the effects you want on a critical skill. It gives you a consistent source of stars, it gives you a way to absorb them, and it also gives you a nicely sized critical damage up to complement them. So this skill is almost like, you know, Lancelot's Saber's second and third skill put together, albeit the numbers are a bit lower, so it's pretty insane. And of course, as we look at his other skills, they further complement this critical playstyle, in my opinion. The 50% mental debuff resist up might seem niche at first, which, I mean, it is. However, that 50% mental debuff resist paired with his passive can go all the way up to a 67.5% debuff resist against mental debuffs, which is very useful against certain bosses. And of course, if you want to guarantee that not happening, you can even pair him up with supports such as Asclepius or Rhaenys to basically get that mental debuff resist up to 100%. So because of how big that resist up is, in my opinion, it still has tactical value, but if you remove that effect from the skill, this is still a super solid skill anyway. Iori's second skill is a 30 MP battery, a 3-turn 20% attack up, a 20 star bomb, and an AoE 1000 damage burn for 3 turns, all on a 6-turn cooldown. So this is yet another skill that complements Iori's critical playstyle very well. As I've mentioned before, I very much appreciate servants with both star bombs and star per turn effects in their kit, because this means that they can immediately start critting, but also keep on critting after the first turn without any external help. The 20 star bomb also, of course, synergizes very well with the star absorb up effect on his first skill, making that first turn crit very consistent. The 20% attack up is also a nice steroid, being able to buff both his MP damage as well as his card damage. And of course, this skill also comes with a 30 MP battery. We know the drill with 30 MP batteries, pairs very well with especially CEs with 50 starting charge, pairs well with a Pen 2 at max, and it allows him to buster loop. Alright, and there are some merit to looping him because his MP does have a ramp up effect, but once again, 1-on-1 farming nodes are so rare these days that I feel like it's not worth taking too seriously, but you can obviously do that if you want to, so having that option is gonna be nice. The AoE 1000 damage burn is usually not really that significant. There are some specific cases where it can benefit Honey Lake users because if you don't have any burn effects, you would have to use a card on the enemy to burn them with command code first, then use his MP, which is a pretty unoptimal chain. So having this burn skill under certain compositions can be really useful, but overall, even if you remove this effect, this is still a super solid skill. Iori's third skill is a 3-turn 20% rainbow buff, a 3-turn 500% damage cut, and a 2-time 3-turn evade on a 6-turn cooldown. So this skill is pretty nice. A 3-turn 20% rainbow buff back in the day I would complain about, because usually I would have taken a 30% duo buff instead, but because of the addition of Yui Shosetsu, I think rainbow buffs stocks have increased by quite a bit. Yui's MP buffs you depending on what kind of card type buffs you have on yourself, and if you have all three of them, her MP is a super strong buff. So having multi-turn lasting rainbow buffs nowadays is really good, just to pair with Yui Shosetsu, so I like this a lot. The 500 damage cut is really nice, especially if you use him against Lancers, because the class advantage is calculated first, so it's almost like a 1000 damage cut. You can mitigate a lot of hits. It's also not hit based, it's just straight up 3 turns, so it can protect him quite a bit better if you are soloing with him. A 2-time 3-turn evade is, in my opinion, usually better in a team than in a solo. In a solo, it's usually worse than a 1-turn evade because you're taking 3 hits every single turn. However, once again, because of that damage cut, I think it compensates this pretty well. Overall, really good skill. Great enabler of Yui Shosetsu's MP as well. So I appreciate this a lot. His passives are unfortunately quite boring. Mag Resistance B with 17.5% debuff resista pairs very well with his first skill in particular against mental debuffs, but otherwise it's pretty underwhelming. He also of course has Riding B like a lot of other sabers, and it's just an 8% quick buff, which he only has 1 quick card, so this is basically a non-passive, so pretty boring. And finally, Iori's MP is a single target 6-hit Buster MP that gives him 20% quick and Buster up for 3 turns before damage. It also has a full turn of sure hit. And finally, the overcharge effect is a star bomb that scales from 10 stars all the way up to 30 stars. So really powerful and simple MP. The 3-turn 20% Buster and quick up for 3 turns before damage is borderline an SSR effect. If this actually scaled with his overcharge, I'd call this an SSR ramp up effect. The Buster up obviously is really helpful for both his MP damage and his card damage, and if you use him in a Buster looping comp, he will have gradually increasing damage as well. The quick up might feel a little bit wasted. This is why I said a lot of people wanted him to have 2 quick cards instead of 2 arts cards, but still, this effect lasts for 3 turns. It's not like this is ever going to be really wasted on his 1 quick card, and also if you are soloing with him and using Mighty Chains, this is a really nice boost for both damage as well as the star generation on his quick card. The sure hit is also a nice anti-gimmick. It's obviously not as good as an Invo Pierce, but still there are bosses with unremovable evades as their gimmicks. For example, those very annoying 10-hit chanced evades, Iori can kind of just ignore them. There's also obviously enemies that like to spam their evade skills, such as Kukulane using protection from arrows. This MP weirdly reminds me of Melusine Lancer's Buster MP, where she also has a 20% Buster ramp up, as well as a Pierce effect, albeit hers is Invo Pierce, which is infinitely better. And finally, the star drop on MP effect is a nice complement to his critical playstyle. It basically makes his 10 star per turn even higher of a number whenever he gets to MP, but I definitely would have preferred if the overcharge didn't scale with star drop amount, have this scale his damage instead. I definitely feel like that was an intentional choice to nerf his kit a bit because he is a welfare, but overall I like this MP a lot. It's just simple, it's always gonna be good, and that's a great trait for a welfare to have. In terms of farming, honestly, there isn't that much to be said about Iori since he's just a standard single target with 30 MP battery. Obviously, as I mentioned before, the 30 MP battery can be pretty helpful in both single core and multi-core. In multi-core setups, if you have enough AoE charge, such as if you're using someone like Tonalico, or if the event actually has 50 MP starting charge CEs, it can be in particularly very useful and allow him to use his MP very easily. And of course in single core, even though the occasion is probably very rare, he is able to loop with double Koyan Light plug Oberon with a 50 MP start CE if you max out his append too. But once again, like I've said before, this stuff really isn't that applicable in most cases, and you know, he does have a ramp up MP, so it definitely does benefit him if he's able to MP multiple times in one farming node, but at the same time he doesn't really have a strong anti-niche, so in a lot of the cases when you're using like multi-core farming especially, you really want a servant to have some sort of specific anti-traits to counter that singular enemy in order to do enough damage even without investing too many buffs onto them. And overall, you know, he's serviceable. The only comparison I can really think of is Bedivere, and each have their own benefits. Bedivere has the very special benefit of being able to buff his teammate, but Iori definitely does more damage, even if we're just talking about the first MP. So if you don't need that AoE MP damage up buff, Iori is just going to be a better version, and honestly a cheaper version of Bedivere, because Bedivere is a story log 3-star. Iori's damage is also very impressive, and we will do a little bit of a comparison here. Obviously, this comparison is done with the help of the very popular MP damage comparison sheet done by Red 10 Taisel, probably the most popular thing that FGO tubers source that isn't the FGO wiki, and I don't think he gets enough credit for it, so I'm going to shout him out here and also leave a link in the description. And also, before you call me clueless and misleading by just blindly following the list, I don't, because obviously the list is not going to reflect the truth completely. It only considers the servant's own buffs without any CEs, and also one-turn buffs will be considered into this damage. So in this sheet, I will be marking servants with only one-turn buffs with a red mark, indicating that their damage might actually be lower than what it seems, and I will mark servants with a ramp up effect on their MP with a green mark, meaning that their MP damage actually has higher potential. So as you can see here, Iori basically matches up to most other 4-star single target sabers at MP5, which is very impressive because obviously he's guaranteed to be MP5 due to him being a welfare, and there's no guarantee for you to have other 4-stars to be MP5. And even some of the 4-stars that beat him usually have one-turn buff steroids, so Iori instead has a ramp-up MP. So, you know, when we consider both of these things together, Iori's damage might even eclipse some of the ones that seems to beat him on this list. Even when compared to SSRs, Iori's MP damage can compare up to MP3 of a lot of SSRs, especially ones without MP upgrades, and you know, mostly we expect welfares to hit about as hard as an SSR at MP2, so being able to hit as hard as SSRs at MP3 is honestly really impressive. And once again, a lot of these SSRs also have one-turn buff steroids, so their MP damage is going to be a little bit worse than what it actually shows here. So overall, my point isn't actually to do a super in-depth comparison, but just to give you an idea how good Iori's damage is, and to basically solidify how, you know, even if you already have a couple of decent single target sabers SSR, there's absolutely still a lot of reasons to use Iori instead of just ditching him and using him only as a temporary substitute. In terms of challenge quest performance, he is perhaps one of the most well-rounded DPS servants in the game. He has all you can want on a DPS servant in terms of his kit. He has a hard defense in the form of the 2x 3-turn evade. He has soft defense in the form of the 3-turn damage cut. He has a bunch of ways to generate stars, including instant stars that you can use at round start in the 20-star bomb in his second skill, as well as a sustainable source of stars in his first skill's 10-star per turn, as well as his MP's 10-star star bomb. He also has a plethora of different types of buffs that belongs in 3 different brackets. So if you don't know that in FGO there are multiple different brackets of buff types, and when you add up buffs from different brackets, they are multiplied together, but if you add up buffs from the same bracket, they are added together. And the number will yield larger if you are multiplying all of these different buffs types together instead of adding them together. So Iori has a critical damage up in his first skill, Iori has an attack up on his second skill, and card types up on his third skill, as well as his MP. So all of these are different buff types and they will all multiply together. Iori also has a star absorb up to make his crits even more consistent, even though it's only 500% and nothing crazy like Saber Lancelot's 5000%. Because of how many stars he makes, that is basically never going to be a problem. And because of how often and consistently he can crit, his MP gain from his face cards are also going to be higher than it initially seems when we are only looking at his base MP gain. His buster card damage is obviously also really good because of his consistent crits, as well as his ability to ramp up his buster from his MP. His MP being able to provide both a card type buff, well, 2 card type buffs actually, as well as a star bomb, means that even after he runs out of his skill duration, he can still maintain a great level of damage as well as crit consistency. It almost forms a positive feedback loop where he makes stars and he crits easier and he gains his MP back more, and then he gets to MP again, and then rinse and repeat. So Iori is just a very consistent servant that really never runs out of gas, despite being a buster servant, which a lot of them are known to run out of gas very quickly. The sure hit on MP is also just a little nice bonus in order for him to deal with some boss gimmicks more effectively and to give him just a little bit more utility. The only thing that he technically lacks as a single target DPS is his anti-trait. He does not have any anti-traits, and in this day and age, usually you want your single target boss killer to have some form of anti-niche to stand out from others. But once again, we are already evaluating him with an SSR servant standards, and if you just remember how he's actually a 4-star welfare, his kit is definitely overtuned. As we've seen before, his damage definitely is super competitive against even a lot of the SSR single target sabers, and his kit is perhaps even more all-encompassing than a lot of those SSR sabers. In conclusion, Iori is one of, if not the strongest DPS welfares we've ever seen in the game, being a unit that you would actively pick over your SSR options, especially if you don't have any particular game plan in mind and you just want someone to cover all fronts. It's also such a breath of fresh air to finally see another single target buster saber after so many quick and arts ones. I don't have that many interesting things to say about Iori in the video, but that's simply because of how all-encompassing and overall good his kit is. There really isn't any specific situations where he will perform poorly against, and also there really isn't any specific team comps that he needs to fit into in order to be effective. You can just throw him at anything and he would probably kill them with relative ease, especially if you're throwing him against a Lancer, of course. And sometimes for a welfare servant, all you want is them to be good, easy to use, straightforward, and strong, and Iori is all of those things, so he's definitely a welfare that you should absolutely pick up and you would regret if you miss out on. So with 5 days left in the event, please try to get Iori to MP5 and get all of his Ascension materials. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I apologize for the super long delay, and I'll see you guys in the next video where I will be talking about Yui Shosetsu, another 4-star that far eclipsed a bunch of SSR options, and even more so than Iori in certain aspects. I'll see you guys in the next one.